In this recording, I want to take the ancient Chinese dynasties, as well as the Chinese dynasties until the dissolvement of the Chinese Empire in the 1920s. There's one thing you can learn from the Chinese dynasties. Now, I'm not going through all the Chinese dynasties. That's not necessary, because most of them are quite similar. They did exactly the same thing. They were a parasite system that exploited the Chinese peoples, because there was no such thing as a Chinese people. You had the Chinese peoples, you had the Chinese ethnicities with their languages. Because the Chinese dynasties, it comes down to this. You had the emperor that lived somewhere in the capital, surrounded by warlocks who went through life as females. So the Chinese emperor had a trans harem. Yes, a trans harem. Those multiple wives were not women most of the time. They were trannies. So now I explained that to you also. There were real women that the Chinese emperor was involved with because he had to have an offspring. But, well, he was an Apollonist, remember? And Apollonists hate females. So he had to find his relaxation in multiple fake women. And those warlocks were also involved in fortune telling in the government. Okay, so now you know that about the Chinese dynasties. Okay. Below the Chinese emperor and the trans concubines or the trans harem, you had the imperial ministers and you had the local kingdoms, because you had royal dynasties below the Chinese emperor throughout China. And below the royal dynasties in the kingdoms, you had their own, what you could call national administration. So China was a big bloc. It was not a nation, okay? You had an imperial army, that's true, and you had an imperial anthem, but it was an empire. It was not a country, okay? It functions as a country externally, but it was a collection of countries that all function together as a bloc, okay? Now look. There was one thing the Chinese dynasties did right. There was one thing they were correct in. And I'm not talking about their hatred of females and about the mutilation of females that they enforced on the population. Because I'm not going to talk about that in this video. I'm not talking about all of that. I'm not talking about the stagnating politics internally that they often had. There was one thing the Chinese dynasties did right. And this thing, people of today can learn from it. And to some extent, the upper class, I'm not talking about the elites, I'm talking about the wealthy around the world, often, not always, but often, they hold on to this wisdom that the Chinese dynasties had. I'm going to give a parable now. It's the 1600s. A ship with Dutch folks enter Hong Kong. So they think they will come there, going to find some businessmen that speak Spanish. Because remember, English was not the spoken language of the world back then. In commerce, it was Spanish, because the Spanish Empire was the main empire back then. So the Dutch thought, okay, we're going to find some Chinese that speak Spanish, and we're going to trade, and then we're gone. We want nothing to do with these people. We don't even care about those people. We just want some benefits for ourselves. So the Dutch enter the port of Hong Kong, and they find a Chinese official that spoke Spanish indeed. And they explained, we're here to trade. And the official asked, where are you from? They said, we're from the Netherlands. This is a cold country in Europe. And the Chinese official, even though he knew where Europe was on the map, he never heard of the Republic of the Netherlands. And when the Dutch explained that they were a Spanish province that revolted and all of that, and they now occupied most of the Nusantara Islands. Nusantara was how Indonesia or Southeast Asia was called before the Dutch renamed it. And when the Chinese official heard about Nusantara, he understood. Because the Chinese imperial administration was aware that there were white folks from some cold country in Europe that occupied many of the Nusantara Islands. So, the Chinese official told them, hold on. A week passed by. They were still in Hong Kong. Afterwards, you had the Imperial Navy that came and arrested them. And the captain of the Dutch ship asked the Chinese official, what's going on there? We're here to trade. And the official told them, don't worry. They were shipped to the north, and by land they were transported to the imperial court. And the Chinese official told them, you want to trade with the Chinese Empire? Then you need to give homage to the emperor. And the Dutch had to hand in much of their cargo as a tribute to the emperor. So they were broke. But the Chinese told them, don't worry about it. We will ship you back to Hong Kong, and there you have many Chinese merchants and are willing to trade with you. And they received a document in Spanish and in French, because French was also a main language in international affairs. They gave them a document both in Spanish and French, and of course they had to give them one in Chinese also, because it was China. And the document explained the terms and conditions of trading with and within China. So the Dutch, when they were back in Hong Kong, went through the document. They were thinking, man, these people are very stern. And there were even regulations that said that if one of the sailors impregnated a Chinese woman, that the man would have to either move to China or he had to pay around 100 real each year to China on behalf of that woman that he impregnated. Real was the Spanish currency at the time that was used internationally. So those Dutch were very upset. They were angry. They were saying amongst each other, hey, we came here to trade. We didn't come here to become part of China. But here's the thing, one of the Chinese merchants who also spoke Spanish told him. He told them, gentlemen, how you conduct business is not how we do it over here. You, from that cold country over there in Europe, you have this impersonal, inhuman attitude that is all about the numbers and the facts. You have a will, you want something, and the thing you want is in the hands of someone else. So now you want to trick what you want out of the hand of someone else so you can get what you want. And after you get what you want, you don't even care about that individual anymore, or about those people. Or, as some of your countrymen do, you go to the south of Asia, to the Nusantara Islands, and you occupy those islands, and you make people give you what you want, when you want, and however you want. Well, here in China, we do it different. Here, there is exploitation. There is conflict amongst the kingdoms here. I mean, we claim to be governed by the Son of Heaven, that we're the center of the world, but in fact, we're not. We're not a heaven on earth. There's a lot of trouble here. So if you choose to trade with China, you need to know what you're getting involved with. So when you get involved with us, you get involved with us. You get involved with our conflicts, with our mess, but you also have access to our bounty and to our wealth. And because you're getting something from us, we want something in return. Not just money, because money we have enough here. We want some contribution from you to the well-being of our empire. You can't just come here, spend some cash, get what you want, and we're left behind with the consequence. No, we don't do that over here. That's why we have a law. Any ship that enters a Chinese port for trade, they have to give homage to the emperor. They need to lose something to the emperor. And here's the thing, because you lose something to the emperor, you get attached to the emperor. And you know, every time you come here, you need to give homage to the emperor. You have to give tribute every time, but you need to understand, to get involved with China, you get involved with us. And you need to acknowledge what we have. And you need to be responsible towards us while you're here. When the Chinese man explained that, the Dutch man, they didn't want to be there anymore. And this parable is not to discriminate against the Dutch, but the Dutch sailors at the time, who were often pirates, they acted like that. They just wanted to get what they wanted, and they often used intimidation to get what they wanted, and they thought they had the right to get away with it. When they came to China, and this is recorded in history, the Chinese emperor neither the Chinese local kings, neither the Chinese population took their attitude. Yes, there were crooked con men that got involved with the Dutch, but in general, people didn't take it. And you know what? China did the right thing. They did. Because they had this policy, no foreign power could easily exploit China. There was smuggling going on, especially in opium. There was smuggling, but even the smugglers had this cultural attitude. You need to contribute something to my homeland. And you know what? The Chinese dynasties did the right thing. Look at this way. In the West, you have this fictive separation between business and private, or business and pleasure. When you today enter an airport, you just got off the plane, they ask, are you here for business or for pleasure? This duality between business and pleasure, or between personal and business, is fictive. It doesn't exist in reality. Okay? And the Chinese dynasties knew this. They knew that as human beings, there is no such thing as no strings attached. Someone can do something for you and without expecting anything in return. Someone can do something good for you, be kind to you, without manipulating you and giving them something. That exists. Okay, that's natural affection. But if you receive natural affection from someone and you act out in a negative way against it, it will affect you. The other individual did not force you to do anything for him because they were kind to you, but because you acted out in a negative way, on you there are consequences. So this whole thing of separation between business and private, it doesn't exist. And the ancient Chinese knew this. That's why with them, when you wanted to trade with China, you had to acknowledge the emperor. You had to acknowledge the imperial regime. You had to acknowledge them. And here's the thing. That's how China managed to remain an empire despite all the internal instabilities. After the Chinese Empire, there was a brief period when Japan occupied parts of the country. When it became united under Mao Zedong, to some extent, I'm not saying complete, but to some extent, they continued the imperial policy in a republican manner. To get involved with China, you need to acknowledge them personally. And in the Chinese diaspora, in the Chinese communities overseas, the Chinese, to some extent, still have this imperial mindset. You can't just get involved with them economically or financially. They do business with foreigners and with other communities, of course, but to get involved with them, still, they have their thing together and they will prefer their own, because with them, you need to act in a Chinese manner. When Japan, this is not China, when Japan opened itself for foreign trade, in the first few years, there was a lot of exploitation and smuggling, so they enforced a policy that they will modernize, but you will have to acknowledge their emperor also. The Korean kingdom, when it got into a trade deal with Japan, did a similar thing. Now, why am I mentioning all of this? It is because this psychopathic, narcissistic separation between private and business is what's causing the demise of what they call the Western worlds or the Western communities. It's also what's causing the demise of most marriages, most relationships, and many economies. Let me explain why. If someone comes to you with this narcissistic attitude that they want something, they have a will, and for some reason they want you to give in to that will, regardless how that will affects you, and they offer you some compensation, thinking you have to value the compensation, and after you get the compensation, they're done with you. If someone gets used to treating you like that, others will notice it and other narcissists will do it also. So after a while, you have a bunch of narcissists exploiting you. You get what I'm saying here? But if from the beginning, you make plain, you're dealing with me, you're dealing with me. And there's no likes and dislikes over here. You deal with me, 100%. Yes, I should behave towards you, I should be considerate towards you, but you have to be considerate towards me also. Even if you have a strong advantage me, you should consider me and I should consider you. If you demand reciprocity from the start, the narcissist will back off. Because the narcissist will begin to accuse you, become fed up with you, because the narcissist has no intention of operating in reciprocity. He just wills something, he or she just has a will, and that will has to be worshipped. And they will give compensation, but if they give compensation, they will even accuse you of the compensation they've given onto you to blackmail you into handing over whatever they want. Whether it's sex, or whether it's money, or whether it's privileges, or acknowledgement, or validation, whatever it is. That's how narcissists operate. So when you're dealing with people, you have to understand that there are narcissists amongst them. And even if someone is not a narcissist, there are folks with narcissistic attitudes. So it's not about enforcing boundaries, about enforcing limitations. It's about being real. It's about being practical. It's about demanding and expecting reciprocity. This whole mindset, never expect anything from anyone so you won't be disappointed, it's a hoax. You should have natural expectation of others. You should expect reciprocity from others. If you live in a community of over 1 million people, you will not be in contact individually with all those 1 million people. You can't. You can't even remember all their names. But in general, you can expect everyone over there in that community to operate in a safe manner towards one another. So there are basic common expectations you should expect from everyone in that community. Now you're not deeply involved with everyone, so there are things you can't expect from everyone, but you should have basic expectations of people. The whole idea never expect anything from anyone is BS. It's unnatural. But here's the thing, a lot of folks adopt this narcissistic attitude of never expect anything from anyone, and here's why. Because they don't want any responsibility themselves, they just want relief. Don't get me wrong, there was relief seeking amongst the Chinese dynasties. There was relief seeking in China also. It's a world, I understand that. But they had this practical, realistic attitude, there must be reciprocity. But people in postmodern culture today are taught not to demand reciprocity. They are taught to demand validation. And they are taught to demand validation even at the expense of the other. They call it respect. Respect, respect, respect. People get very upset when they don't get respect. They will things, and when you don't give in to that will of theirs, you don't validate their expectations, they go off at you. And not because they're upset, they're charged emotionally, they think they have the right to take it out on you also. That's how folks are conditioned in this postmodern culture. And here's the thing, in previous times, narcissistic tendencies were suppressed and kept in check by the demand for reciprocity. And the demand for reciprocity is not the same as the demand for respect. Respect is all about, there's an expectation, someone wants something, and if you don't give in to what they want, they become upset and something bad is going to happen. And so you giving in to that threat, that's respect. The demand for reciprocity is holding people accountable when they're not operating in reciprocity towards you, and it means you even chase them or even hunt them to remind them of their responsibility towards you, which is natural. And the community puts consequences on those people and they don't operate in a reciprocal manner. That's how you hinder the rich from exploiting the poor. That's how you keep the poor in check, that they won't exploit one another. And that's needed, the demand of reciprocity. But a lot of folks today, even the older generations, they have not been taught reciprocity. They've been taught you will whatever you will, it's your life, your privacy, your personal space, and people have to acknowledge that. And if you don't acknowledge that, you deny them, you refuse to acknowledge them as a human being, they don't exist for you. That's narcissistic. But it's only a problem when others do it to you. Then it's narcissistic abuse. Then the people go online to look for info, how to get rid of the narcissist or how to heal. But when they have a will and they don't evaluate their will, oh, they always have the reason for having their will. That's narcissistic. I'm not saying you're a narcissist directly when you operate like this, but that's how narcissists operate. So how can you operate as a narcissist, yet at the same time complain about the damage narcissists do? By you operating as a narcissist, you are giving credit to them. You're enabling them. There's reciprocity within human relationships, within marriages, between families, between couples. It's a natural human thing. But this fictive division between business and private that people have been fed since childhood, even in schools they teach you this, it's a teaching of devils. And even amongst believers, this myth of business versus private is prevalent. And they also adapt the coping mechanisms of the world in dealing with this. Well, there's the thing, if it's a teaching of demons, and demons teach you how to cope with it, that coping is still keeping you trapped to the teaching of the devils. Now, I'm telling you as it is. You should demand reciprocity from everyone you encounter. It may, the reciprocity will not imply the same thing for everyone. Okay? Reciprocity from a child is different than reciprocity from an elder, or from your boss, or from someone on the streets. But you should expect and demand reciprocity from everyone. This whole idea that you never expect anything from everyone, that you have to leave people alone, it's BS. In a community, everyone has natural responsibilities towards one another. And everyone needs to be kept in check and held accountable for their natural obligations. Yes, you have an individual will, you can will something, but you must give an account for your will. And your will must be accounted for. It's the whole idea that people can will every will, they should leave people alone, it's their life, they can choose whatever they want, it's BS. In which constitution of any country, whether it's a so-called communist country or a socialist country or a liberal democracy or an empire or an autocracy, in which constitution will you ever find a phrase saying that people can will whatever they will, even choose evil, and folks just have to take it? Where, in fact, literally will you find this in any constitution? You won't find it. Because the pagan rulers of this world, they know that you need to keep the population in check. So they will never give you something in your constitution or in your documents that will grant you the rights to go against them. They may give you fake liberties that makes you think you can will whatever you will, but that's a trap. I mean, seriously, if you are the king of a country, I'm talking to the man, no, okay, maybe not the king, maybe you're a minister, okay, you're not the head of state, but you have to manage the agriculture. You need to manage and count the harvest. And then you have people from another country. That's just merchants coming, they want to purchase the wheat, or they want to purchase the apples or whatever. You have to count how many apples do we have, how big was the harvest, how much do we need to sustain our own population, and what's left. From what's left you can trade. And when you trade, there must be a benefit for the people. But what if you have merchants to come by and say, we want 60% of all the apples in your country, and we're not willing to pay much for it. We only have the base silver with us, and we expect you to take it, because it's a good deal. Would you get along with it? No, you would say, our people need to be fed first. Because without the people, you can't have a harvest, you can't have any apples or any other agricultural surplus. So from the surplus we have, we can trade. However, you need to pay the right price for what we have so that we're not exploited. And if the merchants would insist that you need to take the base silver instead of real silver, then you know what you're dealing with. You would report them to the authorities, and the army, or say the military, would come and take them away. But according to modern day teachings, you have to bend over and be happy that you at least have people showing interest in your products. So you just need to get along with the base silver they offer you. And they will tell you, well, if you have products of quality, they will offer the right price for you. If you don't have quality, you won't get the right price. So if they offer you the base silver only, that means that you're not that valuable. So modern day economics, and modern economics really is based in accusation. You accuse the individual you want to exploit, you can easily exploit them. And that's being taught. People think, well, that's just how economy works. No. Yes, it's a world. There is exploitation and there are conflicts, all of that. It's a world. But in previous times, people knew there must be a demand for reciprocity. And here's the thing, even in this modern economics, you have those supernatural institutions that keep traders in check. Now, it doesn't always work, but at least they have this understanding. Why is it that believers, I'm not talking about common people now, because I've spoken already about the common people and about how much violence they enable. But why do believers enable this demonic garbage of business versus private, or people have their reasons, they can will whatever they will? Why do believers enable this garbage? I don't. Anyone that gets involved with me gets involved with me. Nobody can just get whatever they want from me or at my expense and I have to take it or take it. I'm around, I have influence on the earth, and so you will deal with my influence in the correct manner. If you revolt against my influence, or you revile my influence, or you have a negative agreement against my influence, the repercussions on you. You can't just will for free. With ancient China, if you came there to trade, you couldn't just will for free, want whatever you wanted. Your will was kept in check. And here's the thing, if you came to China, and let's say you were from the Dutch Republic, you came to China and you exploited them, next time you can't enter in. Next time you try to get in, there's an army awaiting you over there. And if they find out, oh, you have colonies in Nusantara, then they'll put a ban on import from Nusantara. So even your income will decrease. Why? Because China was the main trading bloc in Asia, even in the colonial times. So all the nations nearby traded with China. So if you, as the Dutch people, occupied Nusantara, or what they call Indonesia, and you were using those Nusantara people to trade with China to make profit, if you exploited China or you violated your duty for reciprocity, they would ban everything under Nusantara and you would suffer loss. And when it happened, the Nusantara people would turn on you. Man, those Chinese dynasties were smart. They were far smarter than many people today. They were far smarter than even many believers today. Look, I'm not recording this video to praise the Chinese dynasties. I'm telling you, they were smart, they were practical. The same you have to be. Yes, there are times you get along with stuff. There are times you tolerate stuff, especially if you're not in the position to demand things, okay? I can understand that. For example, if you need an income quickly to pay the rent, you may take a job, even if the job is not really what you wanted, because that's practical, okay? So you put up with some things. But after a while, you still come to demand reciprocity, and you will look for a better job. You're not going to say, okay, this is just the way it is. No, you are realistic, you're practical. That's what I'm telling you. Be practical. Well, for now, agree with Christ and be at peace.